Well, greetings and welcome to today's webinar, Who Are You Online? Managing Your Online Personal Brand with Jennifer Radke. My name is Marissa Smith and I'm with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association and want to thank you so much for joining us today over your lunch hour. Before we get started with today's presentation, I have just a couple of announcements. And so first, I just want to mention that initiatives like our alumni webinar series are made possible by our Alumni Association members. So if you're a member joining us today, thank you so much. And if you're interested in becoming a member and learning more about our work, check us out at umnalumni.org/membership. Have a couple of webinars still coming up this fall. On October 29th, we'll be talking about self-care with alumna Liz Carlisle. And on December 10th, we're going to be talking about passion, purpose, and authenticity with Jesse Beyer. This one on December 10th is really geared towards new grads. So if there are any new grads in your life, or if you are a new grad who's pondering what the heck are you supposed to do with your life, join us on December 10th. And you can learn more and sign up for those at umnalumni.org/virtual. And then another really exciting offering that's coming up is an extension of today's conversation with Jennifer called Being Your Brand Online, How to Demonstrate Leadership on Social Media. And this will be an in-person workshop on November 8th in the morning over at the Carlson School of Management. It's going to be an opportunity to go more in depth on this topic. And Jennifer might speak a little bit to what else will be covered during that workshop. But would love to have you join us that day in person for further learning on social media. And so to learn more about that event and register, you can go to umnalumni.org/online-brand. And then for those of you who might be joining us via Zoom for the first time, I just wanted to mention a couple of things that might help you navigate the webinar. So most likely you've joined over your computer's audio, but there is an option to listen over the phone. So if you prefer that, you can dial the number displayed on the screen, 646-558-8658. And when you're prompted, enter the webinar ID, which is listed as 997-419-875. There's also some one-click dial options that are available in the confirmation email you received today. Also, we are welcoming questions at any time. And so you can submit those via the Q&A button on the Zoom panel, on the panel of controls that you have there. And we'll be monitoring those throughout. We might answer some of them live. We might save some of them towards the end. And if you're having any issues with the audio, a helpful participant mentioned that you can go to the audio settings in the lower left-hand corner, and there are some options there to test the audio or change to a different system if you have one available. All right, so without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker for today, Jennifer Radke. Jennifer is an international speaker, author, and strategic business leader with over 15 years of experience in sales and recruitment leadership. And she's now the CEO of the National Institute for Social Media. Jennifer brings real-world solutions to the businesses that she coaches, developing and training their employees, and have made her a highly sought-after speaker and trainer for businesses of all sizes. Before purchasing the National Institute for Social Media, which is also called NISM, in 2016, the social CEO was the owner and chief strategist at Socially Inspired, a social media training and consulting company that is still serving small and medium-sized businesses today. She has previously served on the board of Women Entrepreneurs in Minnesota and currently volunteers her time speaking about professional uses of social media for those in job transition. She also keeps her social media skills fresh by acting as the social media strategist for Feed My Starving Children South Metro Mobile PAC in her hometown of Southern Minnesota. Jennifer received her bachelor's degree at the University of Minnesota at Morris and master's in organizational leadership, in addition to being an NISM certified social media strategist and instructor. She currently is an associate professor at the St. Mary's University of Minnesota, teaching ethics in social media, and is the author of Stories from the Social Side advice from marketing professionals to marketing professionals. So clearly a lot of experience to draw on for today's conversation, and we're just thrilled to have you here. And at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Marissa. It's so much fun to be here. I love the University of Minnesota and this opportunity to chat with you all. Thanks everybody for joining in today. And as Marissa mentioned, we are open to questions, so please feel free as we're going through today to bring questions in the Q&A box, and then I might even have you do some chat sessions as we go. But I do want to start us off with a quick poll. I'd like you guys to describe yourself so that I can kind of get to know a little bit more about your comfort level around social media and kind of why you're here today. So your options are that you are adverse to all things social media, and if that is where you stand, I understand and appreciate, so just let us know. You know that social media is important, but you're not sure where to start, or you're an avid user just looking for a few tips and ideas. So just let us know, and as that poll is going, I am going to go ahead and get us started. Some of us remember telephones that look like this. Some of us maybe don't. But the point of me showing this is just to remind us that the way we communicate has changed. And so we have to make sure that if part of our life or part of our purpose in business is to communicate with others, then we have to make sure we are aware of those changes that are happening and adjust to them as we go. And so we've got to think through what opportunities we might have to make those additional changes. As we get going, a lot of people usually will ask me questions like, why is social really important? These statistics are pulled from a Hootsuite survey that was done in collaboration with We Are Social earlier in this year. And it really takes a look at the global society and how we're using social media. So not just whether or not we're on mobile device, but how many of us are using social media and what does that look like? It is important when we think about these huge numbers, right, to really kind of get a perspective of why social might be important. There are more than 3 billion people utilizing social media in an active manner. And if that's the case, then there's opportunity for us to connect with those individuals around the world, and sometimes right here in our own backyard. The one thing I want you all to keep thinking about is that social media is simply a communications channel or a tool. It isn't going to change the world. It isn't something totally crazy. It is just a new tool. And if we think back, for those of us like myself who have a little bit gray hair, we remember when voicemail first started coming out and the fear that that ensued for us and the concerns we had about how we'd never talk to anyone voice to voice anymore. Social has those same concerns, but it simply is a new tool for communications, and how we use it is what is really important here. So why are we going to talk about social media today? There's a couple of different statistics that we could pull out. I just grabbed one, right, that 81% of the entire US population has at least one social media profile. Those who are most active in social media actually have between 3 or 4 profiles. But this is a huge percentage of the US population that is present in social media. There's also a piece of today's conversation that is around personal branding, and whether or not you are online, you have a personal brand, and people could be talking about or sharing what they know about your brand online without you. Gary Vaynerchuk has this quote that says, your personal brand is your reputation, and your reputation in perpetuity is the foundation of your career. And so we really need to nurture and pay attention to our online and offline brand and make sure that they are consistent with what we want to be sharing as far as what our reputation is built on. There are a lot of different ways that we can use social media, and we have a ton of you here that are here for different purposes. So I'm going to share one more poll. It looks like last poll, just over half of us know that social media is important, but we're not sure where to start. So that's great. The majority after that is avid users looking for fresh tips. So there weren't too many of us adverse to social, which is great. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But this poll that I want to put up now asks me kind of where you are in your life, right? Are you a current job seeker? Are you working but still thinking about a job transition? Are you currently employed, trying to figure out kind of how to use social maybe to better your current job and your role? Or are you an entrepreneur, self-employed, looking to really boost not only yourself but your business? And so if you wouldn't mind taking a minute here and weighing in, this will give us some perspective on who's with us. There are a lot of different ways that we can use social media, and it's looking right now like we've got a pretty diverse group of folks here, but the majority are weighing in at currently employed. And so there are some of the pieces, and I'll leave this open for a few more seconds here, but there are a few pieces of how we use social that can be done for all four of these categories, right? So first is around brand awareness, whether this be the business that you run, you worked for, or your own. Social media can help you build brand awareness, helping people understand who you are, what you have to offer. It can also be seen in many cases as social proof. So people used to go onto the website or onto Google and look for a website as proof that you existed. But now they're taking that a step further, and they're trying to find a business on social media to see whether or not they're active and legitimate, whether or not there are reviews. And then you as your personal brand, do you have recommendations? Are you active on social media? You know, I always kind of giggle when I talk to marketers or salespeople who are trying to build new relationships constantly. And they'll say things like, well, I don't have time to be on social media. Well, unfortunately, if you find yourself in a job transition, you're going to struggle with social proof as a marketer or a salesperson, because if you're not nurturing your own online identity, how do they know that you can help nurture theirs, right? Social media can also be used for lead generation. And so this can be for the entrepreneurs in the house. It could also be for those working for an organization. But how do you gather lists of people who might be interested in what it is you have to offer? Social media can help you build brand loyalty. One of the great things about a positive reputation is that when someone does attack your reputation, you have a community who can stand up for you, right? And that's really what brand loyalty brings to the table. And you want to surround yourself with a community that wants to be able to jump up and defend you. Social media can provide great customer service or experiences. Unfortunately, it can also provide poor service or experiences. So we have to think through how we want to use that. Social media can help us create new opportunities. Marissa mentioned in my bio that I am the author of Stories from the Social Side. It was actually an anthology that had 30 plus authors in it. And the majority of those people I met through Twitter or different forms of social media. And it's an opportunity that came kind of out of a brainstorming conversation and led me to connect with tons of people across the country and some internationally to participate in this project. It was fantastic. So think about how you might be able to utilize new opportunities in social. I mentioned this earlier, but it helps you build a community. There are people that I talk with on a daily basis on social, and it helps us all get through our day, right? If you are an entrepreneur or currently employed, social media is one of the most cost-effective ways of advertising, and it isn't going to change in the near future. So how can you really utilize those activities? But social, for those of you who are a little bit more introverted, can also be huge for research, something that we would call social listening, right? Learning about an organization, learning about what they value, really building upon what we need to know. Collaboration, very fun. Yes, I am an alum of the U, but I talked to John about this online. So there's collaboration. Job search is also another opportunity, and I know that there are about 16% of us in job search here today, and so that's one of the things we will talk about. Now, usually when I get to this part, people are like, okay, Jen, that's a lot, right? Like, I'm nervous to open the door and see what's behind, but you don't have to be. What you have to do is start with goals, right? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And then we can choose how we go about accomplishing them. I will tell you, and hopefully more than once today, that you do not have to be on every social media platform that's out there. In fact, there are more than 3,000 social media platforms and applications worldwide. I know we don't think of them. We think of the big ones, you know, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, but there are more than 3,000 of them. And so you cannot be on all of them. And it's okay not to even be on all of the bigger ones. But figure out what goals you have for social media, and then we can build a strategy around that. The other piece that really comes into this is understanding your brand, right? Who are you? And what do you want others to know about you? Again, we mentioned earlier that, you know, your brand is your reputation. And yes, your reputation happens both online and offline. And you can't alter your reputation by simply doing something different online than what you do in person. And here's an example that I'll give. If online you tell people you are punctual all day long, right? But for every face-to-face interaction you have, you are late. Your online statement of your punctuality is not going to overcome the reputation that you have in being late. So how can we then kind of elevate the pieces we want people to know about, right? So we have to understand what it is. What is it that we want other people to know about us? And how do we want people to engage with us? I use social media as a conduit for further conversations, right? Yes, I have conversations online. There are tons of friends and colleagues that I have met and really nurtured communications with online. But my goal is to eventually meet those people face to face. I won't say in real life because I think social is real life, but I do want to meet them face to face. And so it's a conduit to those deeper conversations. But when we know that, we can set goals around that conversation, right? And it also helps us figure out who we want to connect with. When we think about our brand, we should also think through, okay, we have this list of things we want other people to know about us, but how can we share that? And what's the best way to share it? For some of us, it might be the written word. So we're blogging or writing posts that people can engage with. For others, it might be video or images. It really kind of depends on our brand and what it is that it can portray. And that will also help us understand the format and what it is we're sharing. Another example that I often give is if you are an accountant, a highly visual medium may not be the best place for you. People aren't going to want to see a lot of pictures of your spreadsheets and your balance statements, right? But if you are a photographer or if you are an architect, people may very well want to see the visual pieces that you have. And so that content format can help you with that. Your brand is built regardless of whether or not you nurture it. So be sure that you remember that. And then when you set your goals, it's important to make a plan and execute that plan. Just talking about it or just throwing things out there haphazardly isn't going to help you build the community that you need to reach your goals. And that's where consistency comes in. You've got to make sure that whatever plan you're putting in place for your social media brand is consistent. And that is also why I suggest that you don't try to get out on every platform possible. You can't physically as a human being manage that. So choose one or two. Make sure you have the resources to execute that plan and be consistent before you add any additional to that list. All right, I hope you all are with me so far. If you are having questions, make sure you put them in the chat box. But the next thing I really want to talk about is audience. Outside of what do we want to share with people, we should be thinking about who is it that we want to share this information with. And we have to focus. A lot of times I will talk with a small business owner, or a great example, something I think we can all relate to, is a real estate agent. Mm-hmm. If you ask a real estate agent or a small business owner, who are you trying to reach? Usually the real estate agent will say something like, well, anybody who wants to buy or sell a house, right? Same with the entrepreneur, especially if they're new in their business, or a consultant, somebody who's just starting their business. Anybody who wants to buy my product or service. But if we are that broad, right, we're not helping our message be heard by the right people. And so we need to focus in on who our audience is and really make sure that we are clear about communicating that information to those folks. And so we got to ask ourselves, who is it that we're trying to reach? In addition to that, where are they online? Your audience may not be on every social platform. So where are the majority of people spending their time online? And how do they want to engage with you? We've already thought through how we want people to engage with us, but we have to make sure that we're also offering our potential customers or potential hiring managers the opportunity to engage with us in a way that's comfortable for them. And so when we're identifying that audience, we always want to be asking ourselves these questions and remembering our goals. Brent has a great question here. He says, how can we maintain consistency in social media when the landscape changes so quickly? Brent, that is a fantastic question. So one of the things that I would argue is that although the platforms change and the tactical applications about what buttons we push or how the algorithm is calculating for posts to be seen, we can still be consistent in the strategy of who are we trying to reach, what message are we trying to share, and how are we wanting to engage. And so we have to keep up with what's changing in the landscape. And so continuing education is something that we value at NISM. The certification we offer actually requires it, right? So that's one of the pieces. But even as an individual who maybe isn't working in that marketing space, it's about how do we make time for keeping ourselves fresh with what's happening in the social media environment. And maybe that is things like this on a bi-weekly or monthly basis where you're jumping in on a webinar for the platform or for a concept that's relevant to your strategy and really trying to learn about the things that are changing. And then altering your strategy ever so slightly, because your strategy still is to reach those people, right, in a valuable way. And so you just need to make sure that you're still on track with that process. What makes it more challenging is if someone were to, completely shut down a platform. So let's say your strategy completely encompassed Google Plus and in April lost that platform. Well, if you guys were on Google Plus, you know that we knew for 8 to 10 months before this past April that Google Plus was going to be sunsetting that program. And so yes, things do change quickly, but usually with the opportunity for us to change with it. So that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking it. All right, so once we determine our audience, we have to go in and select the right platform. And there are a couple of pieces that are most important in this. We shouldn't just choose a social media platform because someone said we should, right? I hear it all the time, I have a Facebook page because so-and-so said I needed to be there. Okay, but why? Is your audience there, and is that a place where they want to engage with you? Is it a dominant platform in the industry? And does it fit the type of content that you want to put out there? Right now, platforms like Facebook, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter all have the opportunity to do various types of content, right? And so there shouldn't be too much concern there. But things like YouTube and Instagram are very clear in what kind of content format you need to put out there. And so if you're not using video in the term of YouTube or Instagram's images and stories, then it may not be the right place for you. Okay. I would also argue that if you choose a platform, you need to make sure that you understand all of its functionality. And so spend some time really understanding what it can do for you. Real quick, I want to give you some highlights. This information comes from Pew Research. They do statistics on social media almost annually, and then they've got a bunch of intermediate studies that are a little bit smaller throughout the year. But Pew Research has kind of broken apart what sets different platforms apart from the other. So LinkedIn is seen very heavily as a B2B professional networking site. Yes, it is a great place for hiring. So for the job seekers on the line, this is definitely a place you need to consider. Now I say consider because it depends on what industry you're in, right? Like if you're, looking to be a machinist or to drive truck, perhaps the hiring managers of those organizations might not be as actively searching here. So you just got to think through a little bit about who else is there. Most of the professionals on LinkedIn do have a college degree. There's some salary information here, and that also talks about whether or not they tend to be more urban, suburban, or rural. So here LinkedIn tends to be more urban and suburban. So this gives us a little bit of an idea about the demographics. If we look at Twitter, we can see that it's going to lean a little bit younger. And by younger, I'm talking 30s and 40s. Definitely more diverse in location. I have found a lot of international professionals use Twitter for news, for global news, because it does lend itself to quick bursts of content. That's where people are going to connect with what's happening, whether it be a natural disaster or something relevant to their region. They're out there. But they're also out there listening. What is the conversation that people are having? People like to have it on Twitter. And I think a lot of brands should be using Twitter as a communications tool for customers because that's where they're going to go to complain. So you might as well be there so you can catch that. YouTube is the most used by US adults, about 73%. Like I mentioned earlier, it's video focused. It is the second largest search engine out there behind Google. And so that is important if you're trying to be seen. But if you're not putting content out on a regular basis and can't, then it's not the right place for you. Facebook is still the largest social media platform. I was asked a couple weeks ago if I think that's going to change. I don't. Facebook continues to acquire other platforms and other technologies that are going to make it kind of relevant regardless of what shifts. It is also the cheapest in terms of advertising costs and provides us all kinds of opportunities for multimedia. So it is still going to be a big player, especially in the business side. Instagram, highly visual, leans a little bit more female and younger. So visual products are great for job seekers, depending on what you're looking for. It may or may not be the place that you want to spend a lot of time. But if you have a product or a service that is great to display via visual images, it is a nice location for you. Pinterest, again, another one that's highly visual, 41% women, which I actually thought would be larger than that. So that was interesting to me. The industries there, fashion, retail, do-it-yourself, food, and decorating. So I just wanted to give you kind of a quick overview of different platforms. I see chat. Rosie, thank you for mentioning that you show up on webinars to keep up and grow. That's perfect. And then someone has asked a question about business response versus personal response and mentioned Twitter specifically. But I think this is good for us to think about in all of our platforms. And that's what is it that we want to share. And in the workshop that we'll be doing here in November, we're going to go into this in even more detail, like what do I share and what don't I share? And should I share as the CEO of a company a political statement or something like that? And that's really where it comes down to knowing your brand so clearly, right? And understanding how you want to draw those lines in the sand, in essence, right? So personal stories do connect better, as you've mentioned. And so as a professional, I use stories on my personal pages and on my business pages, but I have to make sure that they're still in alignment with the business brand or the personal brand that's out there. And I'm hoping that the person that asked this question will get some examples of that as we go through platforms here in a second. So I'm going to start with LinkedIn because I know we do have some job seekers out here, and the majority of us are working professionals and entrepreneurs. So you need to ask yourself a few things. First of all, do you have a profile? And if you have one, is it complete? And LinkedIn will even tell you whether or not it's complete or what you should add to it next. I often get the question, do I really have to add a photo? Yes, you do. You are 14% more likely to be found in search if you just have a profile picture. And that's just an easy one, right? But the reality of it is I'm not going to sit down and have a coffee meeting with someone at a mutually agreed upon location if I don't know what you look like. It's kind of creepy. But then outside of the completeness, we have to think through, is it helpful, right? It shouldn't be a complete regurgitation of your resume, because a lot of times if you're looking for a job, people will get your resume through the applicant tracking system. They go to LinkedIn to find more, right? To find some substance, that story. But if you're not telling it, if it's just simply what you have on your resume, or even less in some cases, then it's not very helpful for those people. We also think through what kind of keywords will help you be found, because they are searching for something. And I'll use the job seeker example again, but if you have the words seeking new opportunity in your headline, which is the highest searched piece of LinkedIn, you're not going to come up in search because no hiring manager is looking for those terms. They're looking for human resource professional, marketing professional, career coach, whatever the case may be, right? And so it is important to make sure you're understanding what people are looking for and why they might look for you. You do want to make sure it reflects your brand. You can get other people to help you build your profiles, but you really need to make sure that you're driving this and it says the words that you want it to say. But apart from that, it has to make you stand out. If everyone on this call were a CEO, then what makes us different from each other, right? And none of us are exactly the same. So how do we tell people what it is that sets us apart? There are different ways to highlight your expertise. So for me, if you're on my LinkedIn profile, you'll notice that there are videos of me being interviewed. There are slide decks similar to this one that have been put up. I have not recently, but I have published articles on LinkedIn. So you can see in several different forms, right, how I can highlight my expertise. And that's what you have to work through as well. And making sure that that information is going to engage your audience, get them to look deeper, read more, find out more. And this also comes back to, when is the last time that I posted? If you create a profile and you never do anything with it, it's like going to a network meeting and standing in the corner. You have to be active. And so posting content, sharing ideas is important and valuable. And making sure that that reflects your brand. And this is part of the conversation, I think, that the last attendee was asking about, personal versus business. My personal brand is more than just my time at the National Institute for Social Media. It's more than just social media strategy. Marissa and I were talking earlier, I'm the mom of teenagers. Those teenagers are both swimmers and athletes. They're both in music program. Does that shape who I am and my brand? Of course it does. Yes, I could get into some gray area by putting on my LinkedIn whether or not I have children, but it is part of my brand and a choice that I've made. On Twitter, it is in my profile that I value motherhood and swimming and some of those things that people are going to see me post about, because if people stop and think for a second, they realize that you are more than just the work you do each day. And so they're open to seeing and wanting to see more authentically who you are as a person. Now, if the National Institute for Social Media starts posting all kinds of stuff about swimmers, that may not resonate so well, right? Because people are expecting to go there to find out about education and certification and industry changes. But when they're on my personal brand, if I've been clear about all those pieces of my life that make me who I am, then absolutely the posts that I post can be a variety and still reflect my brand as a whole. Some tips for LinkedIn: you need to post regularly. There are several different schools of thought about what regularly means. I recommend to start 2 or 3 times a week and work yourself up to daily after that. And it doesn't have to be all creative posts that you've come up with yourself. You can share articles. You can comment on other people's articles or content that they've shared. Post job opportunities. If your company is hiring, let them know. Let your network know that. Show the culture. Talk about trends. I mean, there's just a huge variety of ways in which you can really add to the conversation. And I suggest you use a give versus get mentality. Those of us who go onto any social platform and sell our products or services all day long, or ourselves personally all day long, are going to fail at building those communities, build those relationships with others that are going to make it beneficial for us. Okay. There are a couple of questions here I'm just going to look at real quick before I go from LinkedIn to the next one. One is about career transition. I'm contemplating retiring from a 30-year career in a large institution, having many external contacts. During the past 5 years, have kept an active LinkedIn account. I'm contemplating the possibility of independent consulting after leaving my organization. How should I express this employment transition and brand this on LinkedIn? That is a wonderful question. So the first thing that I would do is ask you a follow-up, which is around the transition. So if you're going to go into independent consulting, does it have anything to do with what you've been doing for the last 30 years? And if it does, then the keywords that are likely already in the profile that you've built are very valuable. So it's about telling a bit of a story in the about section, or formerly known as summary, letting people know after you've left that you've created a consulting firm, and you can do that in a couple of different ways. One, you can add it to your experience, the business name, the consulting firm that you've got, even if you're a solopreneur. You can do an article and publish that about what you've done and why that's driving you to the possibility of independent consulting afterwards, and really kind of share with people that this transition is very natural, right? And so it all kind of flows. Now, the wrench in that would be if you are going into consulting on a completely different topic. That is a little bit more challenging, but not unheard of. So I wish you the best, and if I can help in any way after this, please feel free to let me know. There are some other questions that I will get to here in a second as well, but let's talk about Twitter next. So in 2012, I actually swore that I would never tweet. I did not understand the platform. I did not understand why people wanted to know what the Kardashians were doing or what people were having for lunch. But I had to stop also and take a quick glance at what was my goal. And my goal in 2012 was to communicate with as many marketing, communications, journalism, and PR people as I could, and to learn about what they were doing in their businesses, how they were hiring talent, where they were educating. And so I had to understand what my goal was. And I found that Twitter was a great place for me to find these specific professionals. So I had to go out and create a profile and make sure that it was complete. If all you do is put your name and your Twitter handle, it's not going to tell people what it is that you tweet about. And so that's not valuable information, and it's not going to help you build a community. So make sure that you build it out and complete it. Hashtags are super important on Twitter, and so you may need to stop and think about what are some industry hashtags that I could be using to highlight the content that I'm sharing or in the conversations that I am having on this platform. I've also found that on all platforms, but especially on Twitter, you need to tag the people that you might be talking about or the references that you have. Let them know that you're talking about them. And a lot of people do have questions about whether or not they should be tagging and how. And I actually just wrote a couple of blog posts you can find on the nismonline.org website about tagging. But you should make sure that you know how to tag people so that they know you're talking about them. Think through what it is that you want to share or communicate with others, and then put it out there, right? Twitter also requires that you are consistent. And so some tips for Twitter are following the people that you want to talk with. If you're a job seeker, then it's potential hiring managers. If you're a CEO or self-employed entrepreneur, then who are the clients that you might want to be connecting with, right? Do they have certain job titles? You know, if you're working in a business and you connect with, project managers, then and go find those people. Twitter's going to want you to engage with the big dogs first, right? They're going to give you people like the current and past president, or Jimmy Fallon, or, you know, people in celebrity news. But those people are probably not going to buy from you, probably not going to hire you, right? And so it's important to make sure that you are following the people that you want to connect most with. Try to start or even join a conversation. That's the one cool thing about Twitter, is it's not divided out, right? You can just join a conversation. If people are talking about the weather in Minnesota, then jump in and talk about the weather in Minnesota and what your perspective is. Try not to torture us with the wonderful southern temperatures as we go into the fall here and the winter, but, you know, join that conversation. Twitter also has something called a Twitter chat, which can be super beneficial in connecting with other people in your industry. You can Google popular Twitter chats for and enter your industry there, and you will get a list. And that what happens is people join the conversation at the same time on a given day, and you're asking questions and sharing ideas and resources. And then I highly recommend you create lists here to help organize your feed. I now have just over 9,000 people that I follow on Twitter. And if I don't have a list, I cannot sort through the craziness of that. It's real time, it's changing all the time. So lists help me kind of compartmentalize and focus my day. And so I recommend that you do that when you're looking through Twitter as well. All right, Facebook. So some of you who are working, depending on the industry you're working on right now, you know that Facebook is kind of your new website. It's where people go to see what it is you guys do, how well you do it, what people think of you. If you're thinking of this as a job seeker, Facebook is not necessarily where you're going to go to find your next job, except for these are your friends and family, right? They know you in theory better than anyone else. So make sure they know that you're looking for something new and what it is you're looking for. It doesn't mean you have to post it out on your feed. Maybe you're using Facebook Messenger and telling them more privately. But letting people know what it is you do clearly and what it is you're looking for is a huge way to utilize this platform. Make sure you understand why you're here and what your privacy settings are set to. Most people use their privacy settings and set them to friends or even friends of friends, which is fantastic. But I recently saw a real estate agent advertising a house for sale, an open house, but the post was set at only friends. And so you couldn't share it with other people. And her goal, of course, with that post was to be seen by a larger audience, so somebody would move to the neighborhood and buy that house, right? So make sure that you know what your privacy settings are and what that changes. Then think through what types of content you're sharing. My Facebook is mostly about my kids, right? And the activities that are going on and the things that they're doing. Occasionally, I will share something on social media, especially if it has something to do with what I am doing, like a speaking event. Because my audience is my family and friends, right? They care about that. But I probably don't share a ton of detailed information about how to do technical things on Facebook or on other social platforms, because that's not the right audience for that. On the NISM page, it definitely is, because that's what they're coming to us for. So understand your audience. If your audience is a bunch of teenagers or younger, they are probably not active here. Now, are they here? Yes, because mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, and in my case, the local school program wants them here, right? That's how they communicate. But they may not want to engage with you there. So you may not have as much success selling to them, for example. But think through then also, how might you use groups or events or Facebook Live to kind of engage with your audience on Facebook. A couple of additional tips, and I mentioned the family and friends piece already, but it's also a really great social listening tool. You will find out more about a company by going to their business Facebook page and how their culture is than you will about going to their LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn seems to be a little bit more buttoned up, right? Where you get to see whether or not they're engaged in community service projects or if they celebrate birthdays or whatever. And it really gives you some identification around what's important to that company. So if you are looking to transition, I would definitely take a look at their Facebook page and see what's out there. All platforms really should have a focus on conversation, but because this is a friends and family network, that is the other piece here. It shouldn't be broadcasting what's going on. So post things that are engaging, ask questions, and really start in conversation. And variety is encouraged, right? We don't have to post the same thing every day. Make sure that we're sharing different versions of what we have to offer. Elizabeth has a great question before I move on to the next platform. Going back to Twitter for a second, what method do I use to keep my list on Twitter? That's a great question, and I actually did a blog on Twitter lists not long ago as well, so if you need something, Elizabeth, more in detail, you can go there. But for me, I add people as I follow them. I look through their profile and some of the things that they've tweeted about most recently, and I go ahead and add them to any list that I think is part of their brand. So for example, you can add a person to more than one list. And so Marissa, who's sitting here with me, she might be in my Minnesota People's list, right? Because she's local. She might be in my passion for education list because I know her work and what she does. And she might be in another list based on what she's tweeting out about in the business community. And so I really kind of create a variety of lists based on how I need to separate people out. And then I can add those people to more than one list so that I can still see what they're tweeting. So it's a great question.
I just started creating my lists.
Oh, yay.
As we talk.
It's hard to go back, especially if you follow 9,000 people and try to go back and create those lists. So that's why I recommend you get started early and really create those lists. Somebody has also asked about the minimum online presence in support of a job transition where social will not be central to the new vocation. I would argue that your online presence is valuable no matter what the vocation. Social doesn't have to be the piece of it, but you have to think through a little bit about your vocation and what is important, right? So, are you trying to reach a new audience? If so, people are going to want to know that you know how to do that through a variety of communications channels. So business development, sales, account executives, right? Are they good at communicating in a variety of ways? And so they might want to see that through your online presence. They want to see that you know what you're talking about, right? And so share information about the industry, share information about changes and trends. It is tough, right? Because if you're establishing a presence, you do need to maintain that. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't say, yeah, you should be posting 4 times a day and then keep that going once you land. That isn't possible. It's not feasible. So think about what kind of time you do have and build that presence in a way that can really help you maximize the time you're spending there. All right. I want to talk very briefly about Instagram. Again, we talked about it being highly visual, owned by Facebook. You do need to share images here and be consistent. If you are in the job search, this is likely not the place you're going to go looking for a job, right? But if you are in that entrepreneur or business professional category, this might be a place where your audience is, right? It's the hot new thing. Since it's owned by Facebook, it has very similar advertising benefits. And so the cost is super low. There are some great things there. But you have to really think about why do you want to be here, right? And what are you trying to accomplish? And then it is about commenting or engaging with other people and using hashtags. Hashtags are super important on this platform because that's how you get discovered, right? Another question that came up is what platform do I use to create images for Instagram? Yes, Canva is one that I use. There's a free version that is fantastic. There might be others that people could put in the chat box that they use. I use Canva specifically. So if there are others out there, please feel free to help Elizabeth out by throwing it in the chat box. So I've mentioned hashtags a couple of times, and people often ask me, Jen, I really just don't get it. Don't worry if you're in that camp, okay? The short of it is that hashtags allow you to get involved in real-time conversation. It's a way to kind of search more specifically than just putting in the word, right? Also can help you monitor a keyword or phrase online by seeing what kinds of things people are talking about and how. And I'll give you an example. So if you put in hashtag social media, it's going to pull up posts on any platform really that people have identified specifically with that hashtag. So I know they're talking about social media. If I just put the words social media in the search bar, it's going to get me all content that includes that in any way, shape, or form, right? So it might be the media's social responsibility towards pollution. What? Right? It's not really what I was looking for. You could put in things like job search or MN jobs for Minnesota jobs or HR jobs for jobs and human resources. And this is telling you that the person who posted it wants you to know that that's what it is about. Figuring out what hashtags are being used. Sometimes it's a Google search, but sometimes it's just trial and error, right? Do some searching and see what you can come up with. And when you find somebody in the industry who's using hashtags and posting about the things that you want to know, then see what other hashtags they might be using. This goes back to one of the questions we had just a second ago. How do I manage all of this, right? Like, you're given great information, or at least I hope I am, but how in the world do I manage all of this information? Sorry, there we go. So let's talk a little bit about time management. You do need to set aside time each day to do a variety of things. Create or curate other people's information. So one of those two, and then respond or engage. And I would give you this example. Maybe you're going to find or create 30 minutes every day, and then the other 30 minutes of the day, you're going to respond or engage with someone in social. So set yourself up, and they don't have to be done at the same time. If you read the newspaper or look online at articles while you drink your coffee in the morning, then that might be the 30 minutes where you're looking for curated content or articles that other people are sharing. And then you can go out and schedule that. The hardest part for all of us, and I'll be honest, it is to stay focused, right? Stay out of family drama or political drama or whatever kind of drama, right? And stay focused on what your goal is for the time that you're spending on social. If you have extra time, you're sitting at home watching the kids, watching TV, nobody's really having anything to do as far as conversation, then jump online and see the gossip then. But when you're working to work and build these relationships, stay focused and do it. You can also use some free tools to help you schedule. So the first two that I have here, buffer.com and hootsuite.com, are schedulers. So if I do my coffee reading at 5 o'clock in the morning and I find 5 articles that I really think are pertinent to the industry and what I want to share, I don't share them all at 5 o'clock in the morning. First of all, I'm only then catching the other people who are up at 5 o'clock drinking coffee, right? But the other piece is that I'm inundating them with 5 different articles all at one time and not giving them variety. The other tool that I like to use is bit.ly.com. Bit.ly is just a link shortener. Some of the articles you'll find online have pages and pages of a URL address, and you need to make that look a little cleaner. If you use Buffer or Hootsuite, they will also have the opportunity to use shorteners. And so there are some nice pieces there to utilize those tools. If you are in job search, you do need to keep time for activities when you land. So think realistically, not about the fact that you might have 8 hours a day right now to focus on your job search, but what will you have later? And so what you do now, yes, might be elevated, but it shouldn't be, quadruple what you can do once you land. You really need to think about how this plays a bigger part in your overall online presence and your brand, and go from there. All right, so we talked about a lot, and I'm going to get to the remaining questions here in a second, but I do have some quick key points. Make sure your goals are clear, understand who you are trying to reach, and then choose the platform or platforms, right, that are best for you. Go out and share content. Don't just sit there quiet, but be consistent. Okay, so these are kind of the key points I want you to take away. You have to have clear goals, understand who you're trying to reach and what you're trying to do. Choose the platform or platforms that are best for you. Share content and be consistent. I'm going to answer some questions, but while I do, my contact information and that of the National Institute for Social Media is up on the screen. So feel free to take that down as well. So one of the questions is there an e-library where we can find current material on topics regarding social media like infographics, research statistics, keyword statistics, and facts? I wish there were one. There are a lot of resources out there. The National Institute does the best job we can to kind of pull in things that we think are relevant. We do have a resource page. Our website is currently being updated, so I would say by the end of the year for sure we'll have a nicer and more robust one there. But it kind of depends on what it is you're looking for. So if you're trying to keep up on platform-specific things, I honestly recommend the blogs of those platforms. So like, if you want to know what things are changing, the Facebook blog is the best place to find that out for Facebook. Statistics, Pew Research is usually my go-to, and that's PEW Research. But you can also find great information by just searching social media or whatever it is that you happen to be looking for at that time. Can I recommend a few resources for someone new to social media who just needs to learn the basics? Yes, but I would love to know a little bit more about what the basics mean, right? Like, are you using it as a person, right? A professional or personally right now, and you need to understand how to do a better job of that? Or are you just never been on it and not even sure how to post a tweet, for example? Again, the National Institute does have a social media certificate course, which is a beginner's course that walks you through some strategy and some platform basics. But we also have like a Twitter 30-30, which is for brand new people who have hardly ever tweeted before to join and figure out how to really maximize Twitter. So there are a couple of resources that we offer, and then there are others out there. Udemy offers courses at low cost. LinkedIn has its own learning platform, so you can learn more about LinkedIn there as well. Jackie wants to know that in regards to hashtags, are you supposed to use hashtags already created by others or make up your own? So Jackie, that's a great question. I recommend you use hashtags created by others because others then know to look for it. If, however, you are an event planner or you're creating an event, then you can make up your own, but you've got to tell people that you're using it, right? I didn't do a great job at the beginning of this session of telling y'all that the hashtags that I have on most of the slides should be used. We had the UMN Alumni and hashtag NISM Pulse, and both of those can be used anytime you're talking about the alumni office here or the National Institute for Social Media. But we have to tell people that they should use them, right? And so my recommendation is usually use created hashtags unless you have a specific purpose, an event, or you're trying to get something new started, and then you need to educate them. Elizabeth asks, what time of day is best to post on platforms? So this completely 100% depends on your audience, right? So Elizabeth, my audience and your audience might be very different, and so I can't give you a time. Now, if you Google search it, there are people out there who are going to try to tell you. And what they're going to tell you is that Monday and Tuesday are the best times to be on LinkedIn because people are catching up from the weekend. However, what I have found is a lot of people are posting on Monday, but they're not actually engaging in conversation or engaging with other people's content. So like if NISM posts something on a Monday, we get a lot lower clicks on that content until later in the week. But Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, people are clicking on that content like crazy on LinkedIn. And so it really kind of depends. If you have the luxury to have a business page, you should have analytics on each of these places to tell you kind of when your audience is online and what's resonating. You know, I would start, if your audience is all here in the central time zone, start before the day starts, over the noon hour and over the evening commute, and see how that works for you and do some trial and error. And that's really what I would get at. So it's
1 p.m. and want to extend a huge thank you to you, Jennifer. There were so many important nuggets and takeaways. And I hope you didn't think I was on my phone.
No.
I was tweeting out
Yes.
my favorite takeaways so that I can remember them later. And want to put in another plug. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to go deeper with Jennifer on November 8th at 9 a.m. at Carlson School, we'll be doing a workshop, Bringing Your Brand Online, how to demonstrate leadership on social media. So another great opportunity coming up to help you go deeper. Lots of comments coming in from folks saying thank you, and this was a great webinar. I agree. Thank you again to everybody who joined us, and hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Yes, thank you all for being here. It was my pleasure.